Welcome to the 1 Million Years of Joy podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Benaker, your host, and my intention is to inspire you to find more joy in your life through the stories from our guests and the science on joy and purpose. Roberto, welcome.
Glad to be here.
You have had an incredible journey as a photographer.
Yeah.
And I've been privileged to see you evolve on this journey, given that you're my brother,
Yes.
which is absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
So it's really a beautiful opportunity for me to share with the world a lot of the beautiful things that you have done so far. Can you take us to the beginning of your journey when you started taking pictures and filming the wild horses of Sable Island? What piqued your interest to go to that remote island to take pictures of those horses?
Well, I mean, we have to remember that before the internet and cellular phones, there was a different world. And that was the world of books. And knowledge was based on you going to a library or going through a book or watching some television or watching a documentary. So it happened that I've discovered this particular island through a Canadian film that was done by the CBC and in the early 60s. That kind of spiked my interest. At the time I was shooting fashion, and as a fashion photographer and as a photographer, I thought that this island is kind of special in various ways, and I should kind of, through curiosity, first of all, get there. When I got to Sable Island, I thought that it's not just a beautiful place, but it's a place that needs to be recorded for posterity, for history, for various reasons. And the project started as a curiosity project, and it evolved into something much larger. I had no idea that I was going to spend 30 years on one single project while I was doing all kinds of other ones. I felt that as a professional photographer, I have the skills to be able to document the place and record it for posterity. And the end result of all this activity, many years later, we did a film called Chasing Wild Horses, which you've seen by, 30 million people on a global scale. A lot of different conversations started in Canada about the island and what it means to have such a place. And in the end, the island became a national park. I have a small contribution into that conversation, into its kind of development and ecosystem protection in terms of what it means. So, as you know, Sable Island, 500 horses, 500 shipwrecks, and about 500 years of known history. And that's quite a story. There are stories within stories, and that's really what triggered my curiosity.
As an artist,
Right.
you've also done so many different things.
Sure.
From shooting fashion to traveling around the world. And your art often brings about so much beauty, so much awe and wonder that we can often overlook in this world. Where do you find your inspiration as a photographer?
Well, I think that you have to go back to the beginning. The beginning, it's very specific. I grew up in Romania. As you know, I grew up at my grandparents' place, our grandparents' place, in the forest. So wilderness was available all at large. So the act of observation did not start with me being a photographer. I've been observing things from the very early stages of life, as most people do. And I think through that act of observation, you kind of start to make decisions in terms of why you do things. And my tendency has always been to kind of observe beautiful things. And when I started shooting fashion, you have to remember that I shot fashion for about 25 years. I mean, it became a natural theme to get the best of those models that I was photographing. And with that in mind, I mean, when I got to Sable Island, I made it my kind of direction to photograph some of the best moments that I could have encountered. There are some moments that I did not choose to photograph, and I choose in general to kind of concentrate on beauty. And I do it for a very specific reason, because it's available, it's all around. And yet in the world of television and news and so forth, you know, we are bombarded with all kinds of other information. So my tendency is, since I have a choice, is to concentrate on what is beautiful. And that's what I do. That's what I do in general, whether I shoot flowers, sand dunes, bodies, temples, or wild horses. It's all about their energy and their beautiful aspect, which that energy seems to radiate from.
And take us to that first experience when you actually went to Sable Island for the first time. It's an island that is not accessible to many.
Yeah.
What were the emotions that you were feeling when you started interacting with these wild horses? And I know you've gone to Sable Island multiple times, so take us through that experience from an emotional perspective. And is it an important source of joy for you in your life?
With certainty, it's about joy, because it's a return home. I mean, home, it's a place which I very much identify with the place at our grandparents' house. And that particular joy dealt with the idea that there were no rules, there were no borders, there were no restrictions. And in general, it doesn't matter where you go and where you travel, there's always some fences and some barbed wires, and there's all kinds of borders that you have to cross. So those are restrictions. On Sable Island, there's no restrictions, so there's no signs, no arrows, no numbers, no things pointing up and down. So basically it brought me back to that early stage of childhood where all the imagination and all the naivety and all the awe comes together in just one place. So when I arrived there, immediately being alone, first of all, I did not bring an assistant or a crew or anything else. I just was able to roam this island truly as I have done the hills and the forest back in Romania. So in truth, Sable Island brought me much closer to the early stages of my life, in which everything was available in a different way than it's available while you are in Montreal, in Sao Paulo, New York, or any other city of the world. What is different about this particular place versus any other place, that the world really lives in love or in fear. I mean, that's my philosophy of it. I mean, those are the two extremes and some things in between. And what I mean by in love or in fear, fear could be even aware of crossing the street. And so fear, it's a defense mechanism. It's part of survival, right? Love, it's something, it's a recognition that you're part of a larger universe and you're in awe with it, right? So on Sable Island, because there's no stop signs or no cars or anything else, the awe takes over. And in that awe, I become a different person. And maybe some of the images that I photographed have been a certain way, because in that place where everything is available, a lot of things are possible, versus the place where imposes certain restrictions on you, whether you like it or not. That's the reality of the modern day society. And yeah, Sable Island, it's kind of outside that interference. It's outside restrictions, it's outside men, it's outside concepts of good ones or bad ones. Outside everything that humanity has created, there is simply, it's the beginning of time.
When people see your pictures,
yeah,
and when they walk into your galleries, and I've seen this myself, some people are moved with emotion. Some people start crying. Others are in this joyful state as a result of seeing your art. How does that make you feel?
Well, I mean, Grateful can be one way that I feel. Enchanted by their recognition can be another way. Surprised, even though I've seen it happen over the years many times, it's still a surprise when that happens. I mean, 2 days ago, a few different people came in, and they were holding out a bit of the emotion, and in the end, I showed them something else, and then they felt that they were in front of something that was really moving, touching, and inspiring, and they could not understand on why they were crying, but they know that they were crying because of joy, because of happiness, because of that they've been touched in a way that created something within their own system. Perhaps it was a recognition of what I've experienced also while on Sable Island. When I look at these images in the same way that I looked at them for over the many years, it's not much different than when I was on Sable Island. So when I look at an image, especially these gigantic images that are 2 meters by 3 meters, and in the current New York City show, you look at them and actually you get transported through that image to a place. I get transported to the place where I actually photographed these particular images, and in that particular moment, on that particular happening. So it is still very present within me. I have the memory of an elephant, sometimes I like to say. So therefore, all that energy that I felt then when I photographed it, I feel that it resides within the image itself. And that is why the latest conversations are very much about, we know that equine therapy works, really, in various ways to various people. And the question becomes, do gigantic images have a positive influence to all these people? And the answer is yes. I mean, I've seen it over the years, but I've never really quantified it in that way. And on that note, I mean, we have somebody from the Brain Institute in New York City that we are going to do a study about it. And that study is going to possibly prove scientifically that yes, gigantic images of wild horses, specifically these wild horses, I don't know about other ones, will have a positive effect, or they have a positive effect in front of individuals. So therefore, how great is that? Art stimulating a different part of the brain, which is beyond just beauty and acknowledgement and feeling good, but it goes further, into which you as a person, it elevates your spirit and it elevates your levels of being present, really, in front of something that moves you in a way that it's unexpected, So at that level, I think I'm surprised. So it makes me feel, of course, like not just, it makes me want to continue. You have to remember that 30 years in the project, it's just like climbing a mountain. There's all kinds of peaks and valleys in all this journey. And these particular people that come into the gallery and acknowledge the journey itself that I've taken personally to bring this subject to the surface, it's helping me maintain the energy level to continue into the future.
And tell us about some of the big projects that you're envisioning to bring to life into the future.
Well, for a number of years, I mean, I envisioned different types of shows, and that have developed and happened on a global scale. Then I envisioned a massive show of 50 plus images, plus many televisions, plus screens, to kind of bring people closer into the island. And we just did that in New York City. It's still on now at 315 Hudson Street, for that matter of fact, for your listeners. 315 Hudson and Spring. It's on in Soho. The next project is we also built an actual museum, a physical structure. So if you imagine a gigantic ship turned upside down, that is to provide an immersive experience to the people, so they can be transported to Sable Island in a way that it's unexpected. That is going to connect to a gigantic geodome in which these gigantic images are going to be presented, plus video screens, plus projections, storytelling, wellness, well-being pods. So if you think of a menu, there's kind of many plates on the table. Each one of them serves a different purpose. So I feel that you start with the idea that there is just a simple show that people say, oh my God, beautiful photographs. And that involves, which is basically, it's like not much different than when you walk into a restaurant and the chef tells you, say, why don't you taste this? And you say, wow, that's great. Can you give me more? So basically, the evolvement of this particular project has taken its own road, and I'm just a participant onto that road, and a supporter of it. And I'm supporting it for the simple reason because I believe that wilderness at large matters. We created a foundation, an IMOL Foundation. I believe that art and experiences at large can actually create a sense of wellness and well-being across various cultures, age groups, and so forth. And then what that happens, then basically you create different levels of happiness in the society. What it comes down to, I mean, we already know that art is positive, and actually when somebody walks into the museum, nobody walks out feeling angry and upset. I have not seen that. Maybe it happens. So it's known that actually art at large creates many positive aspects for everyone involved. We know that children, when they are young, I mean, everybody's an artist, right? And then they are told that, well, their art is not so good. In truth, we're all artists, and I think that when you're in front of art, it basically brings you back to your early stages of life, and to the recognition that you are an artist, and your art is basically just your proof right here and right now that you are existing. And the art, it's how well you do within that existence, on how do you cope with everything that's happening in life, and perhaps art reminds you that there's a reason, there's a larger reason beyond just all the this and that we have to actually deal with on a daily basis. These wild horses, they certainly, being outside fear and interference, having no concept of man, they certainly carry a specific energy. That's how I look at it. And that energy, I like to kind of share it with everyone else on this gigantic mobile museum, as I'm calling it. And then further down the road, about 6 years from now, which is a very specific target and pinpoint, why 2030, to develop a global museum of the horse, which basically it will be a center for not just art and creativity, but research and wellness and development of other programs into the future that recognize that wilderness at large is beneficial for the world. And we have to be grateful to have this world to live in, and not as a side note, but just as a normal course of things for us to do everything that we can to protect the world. So therefore, the IMOL Foundation that I've created encourages people to look at the world with different eyes and to contemplate life for what it is and to support it. At one point, we have to kind of stop ourselves from thinking that if we save the whales and the tigers or the lions, how great we are. The IMOL Foundation reminds everybody that we're part of the same ecosystem. So therefore, when you are taking care of them, you also take care of your own self, your own family. So you see, art has the way that I see it so many years into it, kind of, it pushes itself into a different reason of existence, where it promotes a different sense of joy, happiness, and the possibility of a positive outcome into the future of who we are as humans.
Can you share with us some of the highlights from your foundation? I know you have contributed in building schools in various parts of the world, among other things. Can you briefly tell us more about that?
I think the most important thing is when kids and schools that are showing up, and you see children being excited and being energized by what they see, being curious and being engaged with these particular wild horses, wanting to know the stories about the 500 shipwrecks and 500 horses and where it is. So the foundation, actually what it does, if you can engage these people into a new possibility of curiosity, that's wonderful. And the second part of the foundation is very much about how do we connect business and conservation so they can coexist. I like to say that we're buying machines, we consume things every single day. And in the context of our planet, what does the planet get whenever we buy a cup of coffee, or when we buy, I don't know, any type of food produce, or a car, or even a house? the planet doesn't get anything, but gets less than nothing, right? So the IMOL Foundation encourages a possibility in which commerce, culture, and conservation can actually coexist. That's a highlight. It's not necessarily a highlight of perhaps the way that I could have explained it in terms of what had happened in the past, because that's not really so relevant as it is in terms of what can happen in the future. And the idea is that if we can actually create and facilitate an easiness into the aspect of conservation and contribution, then perhaps what will happen with the planet, with all of us, for that matter of fact, will be something that's positive. So the I Am Wild Foundation encourages, not just through its own efforts, but everyone to kind of look at the buying power that we have in a specific way, and to kind of look at purchases and to look at everything else. So making sure that possibly the planet, needs help. There's one thing that I like to say, and I encourage everyone to actually read, is to read the book of Buckminster Fuller, which is titled Manual to Spaceship Earth, if I'm correct. I think that's the early stages of development in terms of what conservation is. It was written, I think, in the 1960s. And he clearly defines our role. We're astronauts on a single planet, which is basically a spaceship traveling through space at an incredible speeds. I mean, you're talking about the whole galaxy, like, if I remember correctly, like 500,000 kilometers an hour or a minute. I mean, it becomes irrelevant whether it's a minute or an hour, really. So we are traveling through space, and we have just one spaceship, that's Earth. And I think that we have to do as much as we can to love it, to cherish it, and to protect it. And that's what the conversation is. That's a conversation about art, conservation, and what we can do in our time for this place, which gives us everything.
And for our audience who are curious to learn more about your work, the books, the exhibits that you have going on, what's the best way for them?
I think the best way to go to the website, dutescoart.com, dutescoart.com, or to go to imwild.org, sending a note perhaps on Instagram to the Wild Horses of Sable Island.
Wonderful. Roberto, it's been an immense pleasure. Thank you so much.
Blessings.